The Veraxian hunting parties rarely left survivors, not because they were particularly thorough, mind you, just exceedingly hungry. With 14 stomachs and metabolic rates that would make a hummingbird look lethargic, the six-limbed predators consumed approximately 30% of their body weight daily. A miracle of evolution, really, if your definition of miracle included being perpetually famished and viewing every moving thing as a potential meal, which made Commander Elliot Reed's current situation rather extraordinary. "You know," Reed said to the towering mass of chitin and muscle looming over him, "most first dates start with coffee, not with one party sizing up the other for nutritional content." The Veraxian, all 18 feet of armored apex predator glory, tilted its crested head. The translator, embedded in Reed's collar, worked overtime, converting a series of clicks and hisses. "Your species makes jokes when facing consumption. Unexpected." Reed shrugged, deliberately casual despite the rivulets of cold sweat trickling down his spine. "We make jokes about everything. Tax season, death, bad haircuts, especially bad haircuts." They stood in what humans would charitably call a park, though the Nexus station's attempts at recreation spaces looked more like alien modern art installations than anything found on Earth. Crystalline structures that served as both light sources and habitats for microscopic organisms cast a blue glow over Reed's face, highlighting his remarkable composure for someone who'd just been cornered by the galaxy's most efficient killing machine. The Veraxians' hunting party had boarded the diplomatic station 20 minutes ago, under the guise of trade negotiations. 15 minutes ago, they'd dropped the pretense and started hunting. 5 minutes ago, Reed had been separated from his security detail, and yet here he stood, uneaten. "Your scent contains fear chemicals," the Veraxian noted, mandibles twitching. "Yet you do not flee." "Would that help?" Reed asked. "No, pursuit is inevitable." "Then why waste the energy? Besides, running triggers predatory instinct. Everyone knows that." Several bystanders huddled behind the nutrient dispensers, watching the exchange with compound eyes, membranous gills, and various other sensory organs. A Flaxian diplomat whispered to a hovering Medusan, "The human is negotiating with it." Fascinating and futile. The Medusan's tentacles curled anxiously. Negotiations imply mutual benefit. What could the prey offer? Meanwhile, Reed pulled out a ration bar from his pocket, unwrapped it, and took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. "Want some?" he offered to the Veraxian. "Synthetic protein. Tastes terrible, but it's nutritionally complete." The Veraxian's hunting limbs twitched, likely calculating the calories in Reed versus the calories in the offered snack. Simple math, really. You offer food to a predator that hunts you? Just being polite. Where I come from, sharing food builds trust. Reed took another bite. "You know what's odd? I've studied your species. Veraxians prefer wounded prey. Easier to catch, less fight. But you intercepted me first, passing several easier targets." The Veraxian's sensory ridges flared, the equivalent of raised eyebrows. "You were identified as the Alpha. Taking you disrupts the herd." "Smart, but here's the thing. Humans don't work that way. Take me out, the others don't scatter, they organize. They plan." Reed finished his ration bar, crumpled the wrapper and tucked it in his pocket. "They become very, very focused." Across the station, alarms began blaring. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sectioning off areas where other Veraxian hunters prowled. The overhead lighting shifted to red. "You delayed me," the Veraxian realized. "Delayed you? No. I was genuinely enjoying our chat," Reed said, looking at his watch. "Though I suppose my team has had time to implement certain protocols." "What protocol?" Reed smiled. Not the smile of prey. Something else entirely. "Earth has apex predators too. Great white sharks, Bengal tigers, tax auditors. But they all have one thing in common. He leaned forward conspiratorially. They all went extinct or became endangered because they encountered humans. The Veraxians' upper limbs shifted, sensory organs tasting the air, processing something unexpected in the human scent. Not fear anymore, something different. Your kind has no venom, no claws, minimal musculature, slow reflexes. The Veraxian listed. And yet we're having this lovely chat while your hunting party is being systematically contained. Reed gestured vaguely toward the blaring alarms. Curious, isn't it? Throughout the station, other diplomats and crew members watched the feeds in astonishment. The lone human, speaking casually to a creature evolved specifically for killing, showing no deference, no panic. Some thought him insane, others suicidal. A few, the ones who had encountered humans before, knew better. They underestimate them every time, sighed an Arcturian ambassador, multifaceted eyes fixed on the screen. Every single time. The Veraxian hunting leader stepped closer to Reed, towering over him, close enough that the commander could smell the ammonia-like odor of its breath. You are not prey, the Veraxian concluded, with what sounded almost like disappointment. Reed smiled wider. No, we're something much worse. Behind them, a squad of humans in tactical gear flowed into the area like silent water. No showboating, no unnecessary communication, just fluid, practiced movement. The Veraxians sensed them too late. We're competition, Reed said softly, as the stun fields activated. Specimen 7 refuses sedation again, announced Medical Officer Trang, closing her diagnostic tablet with a snap. Third time today. Beyond the observation window, the captured Veraxian hunting leader reclined in a reinforced containment pod, radiating what could only be described as bored contempt. Nexus Station's detention wing hummed with the sound of environmental controls working overtime to accommodate the diverse metabolic requirements of its unexpected guests. Station Director Voss drummed her fingers against the console. Unlike most command staff across galactic outposts, her uniform displayed no rank insignia or decorative elements, a precaution developed after numerous incidents where hierarchical markers made human officials priority targets. You can't keep calling him Specimen 7, Reed said, entering the monitoring room. He's sentient, not a lab sample. Fine. What do you suggest? Trang asked, not looking up from her readings. His hunting designation translates roughly to Swift Terminator of Respiratory Functions. Catchy, Voss commented dryly. Perhaps something shorter for the incident reports? Reed had spent the 12 hours since the containment operation reviewing xenobiological data on Veraxians. What he'd found had kept him awake far longer than the mandatory debriefing sessions. The Clutch Council is demanding immediate release of their diplomatic delegation, Voss continued, making air quotes with her fingers. Threatening trade sanctions, military response, the usual song and dance when someone's caught with their mandibles in the cookie jar. They're not diplomats, Reed countered. The hunting markings on their exoskeletons identify them as consumption specialists. Trang's eyebrows shot up. You can read Veraxian markings? Spent some time in their territory during the frontier expansion. Had to learn fast. Reed stepped closer to the observation window. Those particular patterns indicate specialized training in sentient prey acquisition. Voss swore under her breath. So they came here specifically hunting sentience. Wonderful. The Veraxian's multifaceted eyes tracked Reed's movement, focusing with unsettling precision. He wants to speak with me, Reed said suddenly. What? How could you possibly know that? Trang asked. Secondary antennae positioning. Among their kind, it's a formal request for audience. Reed was already moving toward the containment chamber door. "I need to go in." Boss moved to block his path. "Absolutely not. That thing tried to disembowel you yesterday." "Actually, he didn't. He had multiple opportunities and didn't take them. That's what's been bothering me." The observation room fell silent as the medical and security personnel exchanged looks of confusion. Veraxians weren't known for restraint or tactical hesitation. "Authorization code 7 Delta 9, Reed said to the door panel. "Command, override." "Reed, I'm ordering you to—" The containment chamber door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Reed stepped through before Voss could finish her sentence. Inside, the air smelled faintly of ammonia and something else, a musky scent reminiscent of predatory mammals from Earth's jungles. The Veraxian uncurled from his resting position, rising to full height. Standing, the creature towered nearly 11 feet tall, primary hunting limbs folded against the thoracic cavity. "You comprehend our gestural language," the Veraxian stated. Translator implant rendering clicks and hisses into flattened standard galactic. "Full of surprises, that's us. Mind if I sit?" Reed gestured to a reinforced stool bolted to the floor. The Veraxian's secondary eyes blinked in what xenolinguists had categorized as confusion. "You ask permission in my territory. Professional courtesy." Reed sat anyway. "You've been refusing medical assessment. Your medics wish to sedate, study, dissect perhaps. Standard procedure for biohazard containment, nothing personal." The Veraxian made a sound like grinding stones. "Humor? Another surprise?" Through the observation window, Voss and Trang watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. The director's hand hovered over the emergency containment protocols. "I've been reviewing your people's expansion patterns," Reeve said conversationally. "Interesting strategy. Consume outward in ever-widening circles, establishing hunting territories in concentric bands. Efficient use of resources. Short-term efficient maybe, long-term problematic." The Veraxian's hunting limbs twitched, likely an involuntary reaction. "Explain." "Your species consumes faster than ecosystems regenerate. Basic thermodynamics. Energy transfer is never 100% efficient. Each time you absorb energy from consuming prey, some dissipates. Eventually, diminishing returns. We expand to new territories when necessary. And now you've hit the border of human space. Hence yesterday's little hunting expedition." Reed leaned forward. "How's that working out for you?" In the monitoring room, a xenobiologist whispered urgently to Director Voss. "He's antagonizing a Veraxian apex hunter. We need to extract him." "Wait," Voss replied, watching the Veraxian's body language. "Something's happening." The massive predator had settled back, sensory appendages thrumming with what might have been consideration. "Your security response was adequate." "High praise," Reed smiled. "So, here's what puzzles me. Your hunting party bypassed 3 easier targets to focus on command personnel, specifically me. Command structure, disrupt leadership, create chaos. Tactically sound, except Veraxians typically hunt for consumption, not strategic advantage. You're not military, you're hunters, so why target command staff?" The Veraxian's outer mandibles clicked rapidly. "Assessment." Reed's eyebrows rose. "You were evaluating us. Hunting grounds diminish. New territories needed. Human space is vast. Must determine threat level." A moment of clarity struck Reed like a physical blow. The hunting party hadn't come to feed. They'd come to test human defenses, to determine if humans were worthy adversaries or simply more prey. "And what's your assessment now?" Reed asked quietly. The Veraxian leaned closer, close enough that Reed could feel the air displacement from its breathing. "Humans are not prey. Through the observation window, Director Voss watched Reed's face transform, a slow smile spreading across his features. Not the smile of someone relieved to be deemed non-edible, but the satisfied grin of a strategist seeing possibilities unfold. "No," Reed agreed. "We're not prey. We never were. The Kletch Council believes otherwise. Then the Council is operating on outdated intelligence. Which puts you in an interesting position, doesn't it? You've seen the truth. They haven't." The Veraxian sensory ridges flattened against its skull. "Truth is irrelevant to hunger, but not to survival. How many systems has your species been banned from in the last decade? How many hunting grounds lost to treaties and security cordons?" For the first time, the predator's aggressive posture faltered, replaced by something resembling contemplation. 17 systems. And how many births in that same period? Clutch population increases by 13% per cycle. So, more mouths to feed, fewer places to hunt. Mathematically unsustainable. Reed let the implication hang in the recycled air between them. Your species stands at an evolutionary crossroads. The Veraxian remained motionless for so long that the medical sensors began registering concern about its metabolic readings. Then, with deliberate slowness, it extended a hunting limb toward Reed. Not to strike, but in a gesture the commander recognized from obscure xenobiological texts. A formal acknowledgement between equals. "The clutch requires new direction," the Veraxian said, so quietly the translator barely registered the sounds. Reed nodded, extending his hand in return, completing the gesture. "I believe we can help with that." The Nexus Station's central gymnasium had been transformed overnight. Training mats covered the polished floor plates. Holographic projectors displayed a dizzying array of environmental simulations: dense jungle canopies, Arctic tundra, volcanic badlands. Equipment racks lined the walls, containing everything from simple climbing gear to prototype pulse rifles. 24 security officers stood in formation, their expressions ranging from professional neutrality to barely concealed terror. Understandable, considering who, or rather, what, had just entered the room. The Veraxian hunting leader moved with fluid grace that belied his tremendous size. Following their formal recognition arrangement, Reed had convinced Director Voss to grant him provisional designation as Cultural Liaison Creche, though most station personnel still referred to him as that thing with too many teeth when they thought no one important was listening. Reed, wearing light combat fatigues rather than his formal uniform, clapped his hands. "Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary badasses of varying species classifications, welcome to what Command is officially calling Interspecies Tactical Exchange Protocol Alpha." And unofficially, Lieutenant Zen called from the back row. "How not to get eaten 101. Reed's grin didn't quite reach his eyes. "You're here because you scored in the top percentile on combat readiness evaluations. Congratulations. Your reward is becoming prey." Nervous laughter rippled through the formation. Creche's hunting limbs twitched slightly. "Commander Reed exaggerates." The Veraxian's translator rendered his clicks and hisses into a surprisingly melodious baritone. "You are not prey. You are students." "Students of what, exactly?" Security Chief Nakamura asked, arms crossed defensively across her chest. She had vocally opposed this program from its inception, calling it evolutionary stock. Reed gestured to the environmental projections. "Survival. The Veraxian clutch has expanded across 12 systems in the last century, encountering 43 sentient species. 38 of those species are now classified as endangered or extinct. And we're supposed to learn from the apex killers responsible?" Nakamura challenged. "Precisely," Reed replied. "Who better to teach predator avoidance than the galaxy's most efficient predator. Kresh stepped forward, towering over even the tallest human. Your species fascinates us. No natural defenses, limited sensory capabilities, physically unimpressive. His massive head tilted. Yet you thrive where others perish. Charming assessment, Zen muttered. Accurate assessment, Reed corrected. And understanding that gap between perception and reality is exactly what this exchange program aims to accomplish. Kresh and his hunting party learn why humans have survived despite our apparent vulnerabilities. We learn their hunting techniques to better protect vulnerable colonies. The station's diplomatic attaché, a willowy Altarian whose species had evolved as canopy-dwelling ambush hunters themselves, observed from the doorway. The council representatives are requesting progress updates, Commander. Tell them it's day 1 and nobody's been eaten yet. That's progress. Reed turned back to the assembled team. We'll begin with basic detection and evasion. Computer, run environmental simulation Alpha 7. The holographic projectors hummed to life, transforming the gymnasium into a dense tropical rainforest. Humidity controls adjusted automatically, filling the air with the scent of vegetation and organic decay. The lighting dimmed to mimic the filtered sunlight beneath a thick canopy. The exercise is simple, Reed explained. Kresh hunts. You avoid being caught. Anyone tagged is eliminated. Nakamura frowned. What's to stop him from just tracking us by scent? Nothing, Kresh answered. That is the point. Fantastic, someone groaned from the back row. Reed checked his chronometer. You get a 3-minute head start beginning now. The security team scattered, disappearing into the holographic foliage with varying degrees of stealth. Some moved with practiced ease, others with panicked clumsiness. When they were gone, Reed turned to Kresh. Remember our agreement. Tag only. No grabbing, no intimidation displays. Limiting, Kresh observed, but understood. From her observation post, Director Voss watched with transparent skepticism. Next to her, Dr. Karras monitored biometric readings from all participants. Blood pressure through the roof on half the squad, Karras noted. Flight response fully activated. Would you become knowing that was hunting you? Voss gestured to the monitor showing Kresh moving into the simulated jungle, already tracking his prey with unsettling focus. Actually, that's the fascinating part, Karras replied. Reed's vitals are completely stable, heart rate slightly elevated from physical activity, but no stress markers at all. Because he's insane, Voss muttered. The exercise unfolded with brutal efficiency. Within 10 minutes, 16 of the 24 participants had been tagged and eliminated. Kresh moved through the simulated environment like a ghost, sometimes bypassing closer targets to eliminate specific individuals. His hunting pattern seemed random to the untrained observer. But Reed was not untrained. You're prioritizing officers with command potential, he said, as Kresh returned from eliminating Lieutenant Zen. Taking out future leaders first. Kresh's sensory appendages quivered with what might have been appreciation. You noticed? It's what I would do. In the observation booth, Karras looked up from her readings. Did he just also admit he thinks like a predator? Yes, Voss sighed. Command is going to love this psychological evaluation. By the 20-minute mark, only 2 security officers remained untagged, Chief Nakamura and a young ensign named Ramirez. Both had employed similar strategies, remaining completely motionless, controlling their breathing, and finding positions that minimized scent dispersal. Kresh paused in a holographic clearing, sensory organs scanning methodically. Interesting, he said to Reed, who had been shadowing his progress. Your Chief Nakamura exhibits natural predator behavior. How so? She positioned herself downwind of Ensign Ramirez. If I find him first, his panic will lead me away from her location. Reed nodded appreciatively. using another officer as bait. Efficient, ruthless. Crash's mandibles clicked in what Reed had come to recognize as approval. Predator thinking. In the observation booth, Nakamura's vitals spiked as she heard the assessment through her comlink. "I am not," she began, then caught herself, realizing even her whispered objection gave away her position. Too late. Crash was already moving toward her hiding spot with terrifying speed. The tag came seconds later. "And then there was one," Reed commented as Nakamura's hologram faded, indicating her elimination. "Ramirez might, actually." A young officer stepped into the command center, interrupting his speculation. "Commander, priority communication from Galactic Council headquarters. They're demanding immediate suspension of the exchange program." Reed's expression hardened. "On what grounds?" "Unethical manipulation of evolutionary trajectories, unauthorized diplomatic protocols." 3 pages of legalese, essentially saying, "We can't teach apex predators to be more efficient killers." "That is not the purpose of this exchange," Crash interjected, abandoning the simulation to join the conversation. His sudden appearance made the messenger officer flinch visibly. Director Voss silenced the alarm that automatically triggered when a Veraxian moved too quickly near human personnel. "Explain what you mean, Liaison Crash." The massive predator's hunting limbs folded into a neutral position, a deliberate gesture he had adopted to appear less threatening in discussions. "Your species survived despite biological disadvantages because you became more than mere predators. You became strategists, builders, cooperators." Crash's multifaceted eyes fixed on Voss. "The clutch must learn this adaptation or face extinction." A tense silence followed this proclamation. The diplomatic attaché looked from Reed to Voss to Crash, clearly trying to formulate an appropriate response for the Council. "The Veraxian clutch has existed for 14 millennia, the attaché said carefully. "Your society has dominated 3 galactic sectors through hunting prowess. Why would such a successful species face extinction?" "Because they've never encountered natural competition before," Reed answered. "They evolved as apex predators on a world with abundant resources. When those resources dwindled, they expanded outward. Now they've reached the borders of human space." "And found another apex predator," Dr. Curris finished, understanding dawning on her face. "One that hunts differently." Crash's sensory appendages flattened against his armored skull. "The Clutch Council believes humans are simply more challenging prey. They do not understand you are not prey at all. And you're trying to convince them otherwise," Voss said slowly. "That's why you're really participating in this exchange, not to learn our weaknesses, but to document our strengths." The Veraxian inclined his massive head in agreement. Reed turned to the diplomatic attaché. "Tell the Council we're not teaching Veraxians to be better killers. We're teaching them to be better survivors. By becoming more like us," Nakamura added, having joined them after her elimination from the exercise. Her tone suggested she found the concept disturbing rather than flattering. "By recognizing that predation alone is an evolutionary dead end," Crash corrected. "The galaxy's resources are finite. Consumption without creation leads to inevitable collapse." Dr. Keres was rapidly taking notes on her datapad. "He's describing fundamental ecological succession theory, predator-prey population dynamics, but applying it at a galactic scale. Ecological theory is irrelevant to Council politics," the attaché pointed out. "They want the program terminated and the Veraxian delegation returned to their territory." Reed exchanged a meaningful look with Crash. "And if the delegation refuses to return?" Gasps echoed around the command center. The concept of Veraxians requesting asylum was unprecedented, like sharks applying for swimming lessons. The diplomatic attaché stammered. That would create a significant jurisdictional conflict. Some that would require formal council mediation, Reed noted, giving us the opportunity to present our findings directly. Voss pinched the bridge of her nose, a gesture that had become almost reflexive when dealing with Reed's creative interpretations of protocol. You planned this from the beginning. Not entirely, Reed admitted, but I recognized the possibility when Kresh acknowledged humans as evolutionary competitors rather than prey. The clutch operates through strength, Kresh explained. They will not listen to warnings from those they consider inferior, but formal challenges from equals must be addressed according to ancient laws. So, this whole exchange program, the training exercises, the cultural briefings, it's all been building evidence for your challenge to clutch leadership. Nakamura asked, her professional suspicion giving way to reluctant admiration. Evidence and insurance, Reed confirmed. If Kresh challenges clutch orthodoxy with only theoretical arguments, he'll be consumed as a heretic. With documented proof of human capabilities and strategic alternatives to pure predation, might survive long enough to implement reforms, Dr. Karras finished. In the simulated jungle, Ensign Ramirez remained hidden, unaware that the exercise had effectively concluded. His vitals showed remarkable stability, the calm of someone who had found perfect stillness. Kresh noticed the readings and clicked his mandibles appreciatively. The young one shows promise. Natural camouflage instinct. That young one lost his family to a Drazari raiding party as a child, Nakamura said quietly. Spent 3 days hiding in a ventilation shaft while they searched for survivors. He learned stillness the hard way. The Veraxian sensory appendages drooped slightly, a gesture Reed had never observed before. Drazari hunting methods are wasteful. They kill beyond need. As opposed to Veraxians, Nakamura challenged. We consume what we kill. They destroy for territory, not sustenance. Kresh's massive head swiveled toward Reed. Your species has faced many predators, not just biological. We've been prey, predator, and everything in between, Reed agreed. That's what the clutch needs to understand. Evolutionary success isn't just about domination, it's about adaptation. Director Voss studied the Veraxian with new appreciation. You're risking everything on this gambit. If you fail to convince your leadership, you'll be executed as a traitor. If the clutch continues its current expansion pattern, our entire species faces extinction within 7 generations, Kresh replied matter-of-factly. The mathematics are inescapable. Consumption rates exceed resource replenishment. And yet the clutch refuses to acknowledge this reality. The diplomatic attaché asked. Predators rarely recognize their own limitations until too late, Kresh said. It is the nature of apex species. Humans proved exceptional in this regard. Only after nearly destroying ourselves several times over, Reed added with a grimace. We learned adaptation the hard way. Dr. Karras, who had been deep in thought, suddenly looked up from her datapad. I may have a solution to our council problem. All eyes turned to her. The exchange protocol was registered as a cultural and scientific program, not a military or diplomatic initiative, she explained. If we reclassify it as a xenobiological research study on predator cognition, evolution, it falls under academic jurisdiction protocols rather than political intervention statutes, the attaché finished, catching on quickly. The council would need evidence of harm, not merely potential concern, to terminate the program. And by the time they gather such evidence, Reed began, we will have completed the necessary documentation for my challenge, Kresh concluded. Director Voss shook her head in a mixture of disbelief and resignation. You realize what you're proposing amounts to deliberately circumventing council directives while helping foment what essentially constitutes revolutionary change in a sovereign species governance. Yes, Reed said simply. Just checking, Voss sighed. Dr. Keris, prepare the reclassification documentation. Attaché, draft a formal response citing the academic protection clauses. And someone please tell Ensign Ramirez he can come out of hiding now. As the command center personnel dispersed to their tasks, Reed turned to Kresh. You understand this partnership goes beyond tactical exchanges. If your challenge succeeds and the clutch adopts a new evolutionary path, it fundamentally alters the power dynamics of 3 galactic sectors. Evolution is not gentle, Kresh observed. Species adapt or perish. And individuals? The Veraxian's hunting limbs flexed unconsciously. The path will require sacrifice. Reed nodded grimly. It always does. But consider this. Every human innovation, every technological breakthrough, every cultural revolution came at the cost of someone being willing to risk everything to prove the impossible possible. You speak from experience, Kresh noted. Let's just say I've made my share of unpopular recommendations to rigid hierarchies. Reed's expression revealed nothing, but his tone suggested volumes. Change rarely comes from within the system. In the observation booth, Director Voss watched the unlikely allies with growing concern. She turned to Dr. Curris, keeping her voice low. Are we doing the right thing here? Interfering in another species' development? Curris considered the question seriously. The mathematical models support Kresh's assessment. Without adaptation, the Veraxian expansion pattern leads to inevitable resource wars when they encounter human territories. The casualties would be astronomical. So we're acting in self-interest. And in theirs, whether they recognize it or not. Karis glanced at her datapad. Besides, we're not forcing change. We're simply providing information. Kresh and his hunting party are the ones choosing to use it. Voss wasn't entirely convinced. And if that information destabilizes their entire society, then perhaps their society was already unstable, Karis replied. Evolutionary bottlenecks are natural selection at work. The Veraxians have reached theirs. The only question is whether they'll adapt or disappear. Across the command center, Reed and Kresh had moved to a tactical display, reviewing the upcoming phases of their exchange program. Despite the vast biological differences between them, their postures mirrored each other, 2 predators planning not for the next meal, but for generations to come. The Galactic Council fears what we're creating here, Reed said quietly. They should. Kresh's translator rendered his response with perfect clarity. All evolution begins with a single mutation. Either it proves advantageous and spreads, or it fails and disappears. And which are we? Reed asked. Advantage or failure? The Veraxian sensory appendages vibrated with what might have been amusement. We are the unexpected, the unanticipated variables. Those are always the mutations that change everything. The Galactic Council chambers reeked of politics and expensive air filtration, an unmistakable combination of self-importance and engineered sterility. Representatives from 87 spacefaring civilizations occupied tiered seating arranged in a perfect acoustic bowl, ensuring that even whispered insults carried clearly to their targets. Today, all eyes focused on the chamber's center, where Commander Reed stood shoulder to shoulder with Kresh. The contrast between them couldn't have been more pronounced, one deceptively fragile-looking, the other a monument to evolutionary specialization in killing. The Council recognizes cultural liaison Kresh of the Veraxian Clutch, announced the Flaxian elder, voice dripping with barely concealed revulsion. Kresh stepped forward. I speak not for the Clutch, but for its future. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. A Veraxian representing anything beyond immediate consumption quotas was unprecedented. 6 standard cycles ago, my hunting party boarded Nexus Station seeking intel on human defensive capabilities. We expected to find another prey species. We discovered competition instead. Reed suppressed a smile as the Medusan delegation's tentacles coiled anxiously. Nothing terrified the galactic community quite like the word competition from apex predators. The data is irrefutable, Kresh continued, projecting mathematical models above the chamber floor. Veraxian expansion through pure predation leads to extinction within 7 generations. Our current trajectory is unsustainable. What does this have to do with illegal human interference in your species' development? Demanded the Arcturian representative. Reed stepped forward. We didn't interfere. We offered information. The Veraxian clutch faces the same evolutionary bottleneck humanity encountered 10,000 years ago. Adapt or perish. Humanity claims neutrality while engineering the transformation of the galaxy's deadliest hunters into their allies. The Flaxian elders' gill membranes flushed with indignation. This constitutes biological weaponization of an entire species. No, Kresh interjected. It constitutes survival. The humans recognized what we are, not prey to be consumed or predators to be feared, but potential partners. Director Voss, observing from the diplomatic gallery, leaned toward Dr. Karras. 17 different species just experienced collective cardiac events at the phrase potential partners. Evolution requires mutations, Kresh continued, mandibles clicking for emphasis. Behavioral adaptation before biological. My hunting party returns to the clutch tomorrow with a proposition. The chamber descended into chaotic debate. Reed caught fragments. Power imbalance, ecological disruption, security implications. The Flaxian elder raised all 4 appendages for silence. And if the clutch rejects this mutation, then they face extinction, Kresh said simply. Mathematics does not negotiate. 3 hours later, after surprisingly minimal bloodshed, only 1 diplomatic incident, involving a Tarkasian representative's disparaging remarks about Veraxian hunting efficiency, the Council rendered its decision. Non-interference with conditional monitoring. Reed and Kresh stood on Nexus Station's primary observation deck, watching the Veraxian vessel prepare for departure. The Clutch Council will attempt to consume you, Reed said matter-of-factly. Yes, Kresh agreed. The first reform is always costliest. Worth the risk? Kresh's sensory ridges vibrated with something Reed had come to recognize as amusement. Your ancestors once asked the same about putting seeds in the ground instead of following herds, about building permanent shelters instead of constant movement. Evolutionary divergence. The clutch has reached its branch point. One path leads to extinction, the other to transformation. Reed watched the sleek hunter ship disengage from the docking ring. In 50 years, they'll either thank you or erase you from their history. Either outcome proves the theory. Kresh turned his massive head toward Reed. Adaptation requires disruption. As the ship accelerated away, Reed wondered which species had truly been changed more by their encounter. The galaxy's deadliest apex predator had looked into humanity's eyes and turned away, not out of fear, but recognition, the beginning of evolution's most dangerous mutation, understanding.